Greetings, friends. Today, in our continued series of going over the Pathfinder 2nd Edition classes, we are going to be getting into the Cleric, the champion of healing, as it were. So, sit back, relax. Italo, roll the intro. Now, for the Cleric, this is your quintessential healing class. This is the class that excels above all others in keeping your party members at full health and keeping other status effects off of them. They are a great class for this too. They have so many fun things they can do. I'm going to start off with they're a wisdom-based class, which in itself carries a lot of benefits. First of all, your perception, which is how you determine, who goes first. You roll initiative. That is a perception check. Whoever gets the highest total is going first. But your perception is modified by your wisdom. So any class that has a wisdom as their primary ability score, they're going to have a pretty high perception bonus. So this skill is also used to notice things that might be out of the ordinary. So incredibly valuable just on that level. It also means that any spell that affects your mind, your wisdom bonus applies to that. And it is your best save as a cleric as well. So your mind is basically going to be extremely difficult to affect with any kind of enchantment like magic. They do not have any proficiency in armor unless you go with the war cleric, which we're going to talk about in a moment. You're proficient with simple weapons and any weapon that your deity is using. So this is referred to as your deity's favored weapon. I always forget the terminology. Too many D&D Pathfinder editions floating around in my head. So, your deity's favorite weapon, you get that, access to that, and then all simple weapons. Your attack bonuses are never going to be stellar. At first level, they're comparable with everyone else. So, to start off, they're pretty good, but, the marshals will outpace you as you start getting into, 5th level, 7th level, 10th level, things like that, where different characters start getting their expert and their mastery in weapons. Yours lags behind like most spellcasters. You gain access to divine magic. Divine magic is a pretty interesting collection. There is not a lot of damaging spells. That's not to say there is none, but it is great for buffing the party, healing them, removing debuffs from enemies, plus a whole host of other protections that you can apply to yourself and your allies. It is an incredibly useful spell group. I would say it's right up there with occult as far as the flexibility of what you can do during a combat that is really not outward damaging your opponent, but being able to help with almost any situation. At 2nd level, you have Spiritual Weapon. That is one of the really good combat spells. It's actually not one to be overlooked. It deals some good, solid, consistent damage that you don't really realize it until you start using it. But before we get too far into the weeds on spells, your cleric's abilities as they continue to level up, they just get a little better at everything that they do, like most classes. But at 1st level, you have one of your biggest things is your divine font. Depending on the deity that you worship, if you're playing in Pathfinder's World of Golarion, there's lists of deities, and good deities only have the heal font. Evil deities typically only have the harm font, and neutral deities and some others, depending on what they encompass, you get to choose if you want heal or harm. Once you've made this choice, you're stuck with it, so you choose at 1st level. What this does is the heal font or harm font, you gain extra castings of the heal or harm spell. Shocking, I know. So if you are going to be healing your allies, these extra heal spells are vital because they're always cast at your highest available spell slot. This is a huge benefit. The number of spells you get for this are equal to 1 plus your charisma modifier. So if you start with a charisma of, say, 16, that modifier is 3, so you're going to get 4 spells that are in your font. If you have a 14, it's only going to be +2, so you get 3. 3 is usually plenty, honestly, to work at with low levels, because you still get all of your memorized spells. These are just bonus spells. You gain spells like every other traditional caster, in the sense of you're going to have a lot to work with as you level up. Also, you can still buy scrolls that are great options for supplementing your spellcasting because they're not expensive. They're pretty cheap. I've covered this before. Every spellcaster, honestly, should have a small collection of scrolls with them at all times, because you never know what you're going to come up against. So you want to try to be as helpful to your party as you possibly can. Even just having, 5 extra healing spells at whatever your highest level that you can afford. These are not expensive items. And if you're not getting enough treasure that you feel like, I can't afford these, you probably should discuss with your GM how much treasure your group is getting, because you honestly should be having enough money that you can easily purchase these no matter what level you're at. So the harm font, that's actually more useful if you are a combat cleric, because the harm spell is actually a great way to deal damage for a cleric. I know they don't get a lot of damaging spells, but the harm spells, it deals 1d8 per spell level that you have. So at your first level magic, it's 1d8, second level magic, 2d8, third level magic, 3d8. But there's the 1, 2, or 3 action casting of both heal and harm. 1 action casting is a range of touch. 2 action casting is a 60-foot range, and then the 3 action casting is a burst. It affects everything within this area of where you're at. Obviously, with the heal spell, that can be a little problematic because you would be healing enemies. Unless you're fighting undead, then you're healing your allies and hurting the undead, which is a win-win. That's honestly one of the most fun things you ever get to do as a cleric, is your 3-action heal. Harm spells run the opposite. They harm things. Now, if it's undead, they heal them. So if you're playing, undead characters and things like that, harm bursts can be a lot of fun because you get to heal your team and hurt most monsters that you're facing. But that's a pretty outlier situation. Most parties are not that. The harm spell's good though, because if you get up into an area where your allies are surrounded by enemies and you're up in the fight with them, you can still be casting your 2 action spells, and if there's a monster within reach of you, you can just hit it with that 1 action harm spell. And clerics, they get feats that you can boost those d8s to d10s for both your healing and harm, so even better. And it's a fortitude save to resist that damage, but most things don't critically save. And again, you will be shocked how many times that enemies are left with just 5 or less hit points, which doesn't affect how impactful they are on their turn. They can still go through and wreck your party. Now, next time they get hit, they'll die, but getting them killed before they can go is vital to the health of your party. So don't overlook that. Sometimes taking out a really hurt enemy is more beneficial than healing, especially if that enemy hits like a truck, because they can undo your healing in 1 attack. So you want to make sure that you have a good grasp of the situation and what's going on around you. So with the healing and harm font, it's kind of like one of the core abilities of the cleric. So many of your feats that you get allow you to do different things with these font spells. You can kind of mutate them to give yourself bonuses, or there's some where you even get to sort of like a Magus in a sense. You get to apply your harm damage to your attack roll, so they don't even get a save. You hit them and you do your weapon damage and the harm damage. So they have a lot of really cool features. The 2 options that you have with a cleric is you can be either a cloistered cleric, which is a very traditional wizard-like spellcaster, no armor, and you're really good at magic. Your saving throws and spell attack rolls are top notch, and most people go that route for a reason. The other option is the war cleric, or the war priest. They get actual armor proficiency. They also gain access to better weapons at 3rd level, and their attack rolls, they get proficiency with weapons better than the cloistered cleric. However, they also are not as good at magic. If you're just buffing your party and healing, cool. That doesn't really come into play if you are not as good with your magic. However, if you're ever going to make spell attacks or cast spells on enemies, having that lower save is very detrimental to your character. You're talking to often a 10% difference in the fact that if it's going to be a success or even a critical success, because your level of training is just lower, and the levels that you get them, they're much higher, so you're just going to lag behind, and it doesn't really feel good, and the melee compensation you get for that still is not enough. It doesn't put you on par with any of the martials. So I know in the remastered editions that come out this November 2023, they are doing some upgrades to the War Priest that they are going to be a little more on par with the other martials, which is great because they don't need a lot of help, but they definitely need something, because right now they're just not that great of a choice. You don't really notice it a lot at lower levels. It's when you start getting to higher levels that you're really going to see that. But you're more than welcome to give it a try and see how you like it. Like I said, I'm never doing these to tell people not to do things. I just want to kind of help point out some of the benefits of the classes and get you guys a little excited about these. So your cleric, you're gaining all kinds of powers that are definitely divine focused about your deity. There's really not a ton of excitement in there like many classes. Well, like most spellcasting classes, all of your excitement comes from your spells, and they have some great ones. Bless, if there's no bard in your party, Bless creates an area that you're giving a +1 status bonus to your allies, and they get +1 status bonus to their attack rolls. So every +1 to hit you can get to people is awesome. You can grow this area. Of course, the healing abilities of the cleric, those are they are unmatched by anyone. With that heal spell, where I mentioned you get the 1 action, 2 action, or 3 action, one of the things I did not tell you is when you do a 2 action heal, I said you get that 1d8 per caster level. But when you do the 2 action heal, and only the 2 action heal, you get to add 8 points per die you roll. So if you're a 5th level character, that's access to 3rd level magic. You would be rolling 3d8 plus 24. That is a huge amount of healing. This is the first really rendition of Dungeons & Dragons Pathfinder where this healing now absolutely outpaces the damage being done by monsters, normal monsters. If you're fighting a big boss monster, it could easily crit you and wipe out all of that healing. But for the most part, that healing is easily going to be able to heal 75% of most characters, the damage they take. So again, a absolutely fantastic healer. And Wisdom is the primary ability score of the medicine skill, which is the non-magical healing. So you're going to be great at that too, because Wisdom's your primary ability score. So they really are geared towards being able to heal, just all of your party, and they excel at this. By the way, if you like these videos and you like this, go ahead and give us a like and subscribe. It really helps us out and lets us do so much more. As you level up, you're going to find a lot more spells that cover all kinds of ranges of things. There are spells to remove so many status effects. There are spells to give your allies bonuses against things before they happen. I mean, there's so many spells, there's really not a lot of point to go over all of them, or you just have to read through them. But heroism is one of the best spells. It gives your allies these +1 to their attacks and skill checks and saving throws, just everything, and it lasts for a minute. It's an awesome spell, and it scales up, and this stacks on top of magic items and all kinds of things. So it's a phenomenal spell. You kind of have to decide what kind of spells really fit your play style, and I think that's something people can sometimes neglect. Is everyone has their own play style. You might be a cleric that is up right behind your fighters and you're healing them. And it's sometimes, you don't see it very often, but it shouldn't be overlooked that it's okay to cast maybe a 2-action heal on one person that's hurt and then a 1-action heal. You can do that if you have the healings enough spells, because there's no limit. You can still, it's just actions. So you don't ever rule that out. I know it doesn't feel as good because it's less healing, but sometimes that healing can make a huge difference. Does that mean you should do it every time? No, you have to look at the situation and look at the health of your party. Sometimes it's a gamble. Like sometimes you're like, he's gonna go down no matter what by this enemy that's hitting for like 40 damage and this guy's only got 5 hit points. So yeah, wasting your spell in that instance, you might as well wait till he goes down and then you can bring him back up, because it's not going to do anything, because by the, giving him only maybe 20 hit points against a monster and he's only got 5, so he's at 25 and this thing consistently hits for 30 or 40, they're going down. So unless you can do something more impactful, yeah, don't waste your time doing that. But all spellcasters are very strategic, and it's important to remember that and kind of play in that style, that to be aware of what's going on. Don't rule out knowledge checks either as something that you can do. There are several knowledge check fields that they're either intelligence or wisdom based. And because you have a good wisdom, you can really look at those wisdom based ones. Knowing what the lowest save for an enemy is a big deal. Spellcasters, I often see things on Reddit about people complaining about Pathfinder 2nd edition spellcasters versus D&D 5e spellcasters. One of the things that people don't look at, though, is the fact that when you compare the defenses of Fortitude, Reflex, Will, and Armor class, that when you look at between the highest and the lowest of those, there is often a 6-point swing versus the high and the low. That knowledge check is going to allow you to ask your GM, what's their lowest save? And then target them with spells that affect that lowest save. But that means you need spells that affect all of the saves, or at least 2, so that you kind of have some options. And it's okay if one of those is like a spell attack and then one affects the will, or reflex and fortitude. You can kind of mix and match, because some campaigns have a tendency, like, if you're fighting undead, undead typically have lower fortitude saves, so that's always a good angle to go at. You might be fighting giants. Giants have low reflex saves, so you might want to make sure you're keeping a reservoir of those. There's a lot of things that will is their lowest save. So it's really important to understand and look at your spells as to what do they target, and making sure that you have a eclectic combination so that you can spring into action given the situation. Now, as a cleric, often that springing into action is keeping your party alive, because during the fight, they're going to get hammered. And often that can be all you need to focus on. But if you want to be a more active cleric and help in the fight and bringing enemies down and using spells that cause a little more chaos and some debuffing, that option is available to you. Don't think it's not. You have that ability. So find your play style. That's where I'm going with all of that is, we need a cleric, and they tell you what to take, and you're like, I'm not having a lot of fun with this. Well, you need to find how you want to play the class, and there's probably a version of it that will work for you. I myself, I'm not a big support player, so I don't have a tendency to play those clerics, bards, things like that. Does that mean I wouldn't have fun playing one? No, I would play it in my own style and do my own thing with it. So you're just figuring out what that is for yourself is key to any class, honestly, because there's plenty of times everyone's going to say, they feel like you should play it the way they should play it because they think that's the best way. And maybe their way does deal the most damage, but you have to have fun. And if you're not having fun, then that's a problem. So you want to make sure that above all else, you have found a way to do this that you are not only effective for your team, but you yourself are having fun. So, the cleric is really kind of a basic class, so there's a lot of options. You're going to have to look at your spells, and every level there's so many spells. And clerics are great in the sense that, unlike, let's say, a wizard that you have to memorize a spell and add it to your spell book, a cleric just has access to their spells. All the common spells, they just get to pick, I want that one today, and that one, and that one. Okay, good to go. Or I want this one 3 times. Or they are a memorized caster, so they don't just get to, I'm going to cast whatever spell whenever I want. You do have to choose at the beginning of the day, which if you want to do a a spontaneous caster, there are sorcerers that gain access to the divine spell list. So that's absolutely possible, but that's not the cleric. So we'll cover that when we get to sorcerers, which is an S, which is going to be a while. Not only, I think there's 23 classes now, and at Gen Con, Paizo announced 2 more classes. There's a playtest coming out in September. That's going to bring us to 25 classes? I'm never going to be done with this. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and it gave you a little more insight into the cleric, or made you curious to play one. So as always, game well, my friends.